try to ask why, and I must speak like in a non-aligned conference in Algeria.
Imagine promising Uganda strength and unity, but after gaining power, you hunt women, steal daughters from their families, and torture them to a degree that is barbarian. This is what Idi Amin did to women in public. Subscribe now because we will keep exposing the darkest sides of history. The monster. Born around 1925 in Koboko, Idi Amin was from a small town in northwestern Uganda. We don't even know his proper birth date because that's just not how things worked back in the days, which also tells us something about the poverty that he grew up in. He was raised only by his mother, who was from the marginalized Kakwa ethnic group, after his father abandoned the family completely. From there, Amin received almost no formal education, and many accounts say that he never even made it past 4th grade. But even though he lacked his education, he still made up for that in his physical presence. He was standing over 6 feet 3 inches tall, with a powerful build, looking like a behemoth of a man. Amin was impossible to ignore. It was around 1946 when British colonial authorities recruited him into the King's African Rifles, where strong young men could escape poverty by giving them military service. This training for him was brutal because soldiers were learning to obey orders without any question, and violence was used freely to maintain discipline. Here, Amin thrived, and he earned a reputation as someone who is willing to carry out the most violent tasks without hesitation or even a point of remorse. During the 1950s, Amin fought in Somalia against rebels in Kenya during the Mau Mau uprising. These were some of the bloodiest missions where British forces used extreme measures, including torture, execution, and even intimidation, to crush the opposing forces. This is what shaped Amin up, because here he saw brutality that he had never seen before. You might think that he was unwillingly participating in the battle, but it was quite the opposite. A little bit into the violence, it became normal for him, and he learned that silence could frighten entire communities, and that cruelty would bring respect within the military hierarchy. Outside the battlefield, Amin became Uganda's heavyweight boxer back in 1951, holding that title for nearly a decade. Then he was just stacking things up on his resume as a man that nobody wanted to cross. He was impressive, not only mentally, but physically even more. By the early 1960s, Uganda gained independence from Britain, and Amin was a senior military officer with close ties to Milton Obote, who was Uganda's first prime minister. Obote even trusted Amin and used him to crush the opposition and secure his power through force. But even then, we saw the warning signs. Amin's brutality tended far beyond what it should have been. Even the civilians started suffering, especially women, in areas where his troops were stationed. He had a pattern of abusing power for his personal gain, and it was quite visible, though it wasn't fully exposed at that time. By the late 1960s, Amin had risen to the rank of commander of the entire army. He was building a network of soldiers who feared him more than they respected the government. He was waiting for his moment so he could take over the government and become bigger than anyone else on the continent. Second wind. Then came January 25th. 1971, when Milton Obote was attending a Commonwealth summit in Singapore, and that's where Idi Amin saw that he could make his first move. Army units loyal to him seized control of all the key roads, the radio station, and even the airports, and by the day, Amin announced over the radio that he was now the president of Uganda. For a lot of Ugandans, the news was initially a relief, because Obote's government was also plagued with corruption. People believed that Amin's promises of a fresh start would mean that he would change Uganda and turn it into a place with less oppression and more power. This celebration didn't last long because beneath the broad smile and his dominant charm, Amin had a much darker vision of power, and women would soon suffer in ways that they had never even seen before. Amin believed that being president gave him absolute control over everything, like he was a god of Uganda, including women. Power for him wasn't just about politics or money. It was about ownership over people. He behaved as though women across Uganda were part of his exploits of victory, and he could claim them whenever he wished. Almost immediately after the coups, soldiers began spreading terror through the neighborhood. They even started raiding homes at night, taking women away under the excuse that they were needed for state duties. Most of these women were never even seen again. Someone was forced into Amin's residence, while others were abused by his soldiers. Families who were trying to resist this were either beaten or killed. The worst part is that his whole government was forcing silence upon everything. People knew what was happening, but they were too terrified to even speak. If a father reported that his daughter was missing, he would probably be executed for the search for his daughter. She could also disappear. This silence became one of Amin's most powerful weapons because his will was absolute. By making brutal examples of anyone who resisted him or even asked questions, He ensured that most families would keep the suffering to themselves. What turned into a hunting ground was universities. Specifically Makerere University, which was one of the biggest prides of East Africa. It was turned into one of the most feared places for young women. Amin would often go to the campus, ordering students to line up before him, and female students were sometimes pulled aside, loaded into the vehicle, and driven away. Some returned days later, traumatized and silent, refused to speak about what happened to them, but there were also others who never came back at all. Hospitals, markets, churches, nowhere was safe for women. Soldiers even entered hospital wards, demanding women for state service. Women who were selling food at the market or doing anything outside were also taken away. Entire neighborhoods whispered about who had disappeared that week, but no one dared to speak openly. Inside the home, fear was only suffocating, and mothers warned their daughters not to step outside after dark, or sometimes not to step outside at all. It was a huge terror for everyone who was trying to just live their life. But here's the worst part. Soldiers would knock on doors, demanding their daughters, wives, or sisters to be handed over, claiming that it was for national duties. Refusing them often meant beatings, imprisonment, or even death. One of the strongest weapons of control was forcing women to control them for him and his men. It wasn't about desire. It was about complete domination and tearing apart families while silencing entire communities through sharing the even. Amin's wives weren't safe from him. But before we reveal what happened to them, subscribe now because it's about to get messier. Amin's wives. Amin wanted more domination, and his hunger was only growing, even toward his own wife. He officially married several women, and some accounts say that it is 5, while others say it is even more. What is clear is that he treated marriage not as a partnership, but to show control and power that he has so many wives, and that he can get whoever he wants. His wives were also chosen suddenly, and were given almost nothing in that matter. Some came from wealthy or influential families, which strengthened social connections. Others were ordinary women who were forced into the role simply because refusing him was not an option. One of his earliest wives, named Malia Mu, gave birth to several of his children, but instead of respecting her, she received jealousy and suspicion. By the early 1970s, Amin was beating her regularly. In 1974, after a violent argument, he divorced her, but divorce didn't mean she was completely free. Shortly after, she was arrested by his security forces, not for any crime, but because Amin's personal anger had taken over him. Another wife was named Medina, who lived under constant surveillance. Amin controlled where she went and who she spoke to, treating her more like a property or a tool than a partner. The most tragic story is of Idi Amin, who, unlike his other wives, was educated and a respected nurse with her own career and reputation. At first, it seemed like her marriage to Amin might give her some influence, but instead, it trapped her in his dungeon. According to a lot of insiders, Amin discovered that Kay had been involved with the doctor, and his reaction wasn't just anger, it was rage. Security men took her away, and her body was later found mutilated, dismembered, and scattered in different locations around Kampala. If even the wife of the president could be torn apart for just crossing him, no other woman was safe. The story of Kay spread quickly, which filled people with anger, and at the same time, women who had once inspired public charm were now against him. New victims. The terror for women didn't end there, because in August 1972, Amin shocked the world by ordering all the Asians, mainly people of Indian descent, to leave Uganda within 90 days. This family had lived here for generations, running the shops and banks, and was dominant in every single business. The order threw the country into chaos, and businesses were abandoned overnight. Schools lost teachers, hospitals lost doctors, but behind the headlines about economic collapse, there was another kind of suffering. Asian women became a specific target for Amin's soldiers, the ones who were trapped in Uganda, who were treated the worst. Soldiers raided their homes, taking whatever they wanted, and women were the first of their victims. Some were forced into marriages with soldiers or government officials, and the marriage was nothing more than getting slaves for them. Amin's order wasn't just political, it had bad effects on humans, and women were caught directly in the crossfire. Then, in June 1976, an Air France plane was hijacked and forced to land at Entebbe Airport, and the world's attention focused on the dramatic Israeli commando raid that freed the hostages while cameras kept the rescue operations. Something else was happening away from the spotlight. Amin used the crisis as an excuse to tighten his control. His soldiers grew even more violent. For a Ugandan woman, the situation turned darker and darker, and reports later said that young women were pulled from their homes, taken into military quarters, and were never seen again. The world's newspapers covered the hostage rescue situation in detail, but didn't cover the stories of Ugandan women who lived through the same pain. By the late 1970s, Uganda's economy had been completely destroyed. Food was scarce, and prices were high, but inside Uganda, his cruelty intensified. In 1977, when Archbishop Janani Lugum publicly criticized Amin's killing, Amin arrested him and murdered him. Then, in 1978, his invasion of Tanzania also proved quite disastrous. His army began losing badly, but Ugandan women paid the highest price. Frustrated soldiers turned their anger on villages near the border. Women were destroyed in large numbers, and homes were also looted. At the same time, Amin's paranoia grew, and he demanded women be brought to him constantly. Finally, in 1979, Tanzanian forces merged into Kampala, and Amin fled first to Libya, then Iraq, and finally to Saudi Arabia, where he lived the rest of his life in luxury. The Saudi royal family gave him shelter in Jeddah, providing him with a large villa, servants, and enough money to live comfortably. Several of his wives also stayed with him, and he fathered over 40 children in total. Even though the Ugandan family searched for answers about missing daughters and the ones he killed, Amin spent his days in comfort. He never faced trials for his crimes against women, or the estimated 300,000 people that he killed during his time. When he died in August 2003, it was in a hospital bed in Jeddah, surrounded by family, not in a prison cell where he actually belonged. Do you think he should have suffered the worst death known to humanity? Let us know in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more videos like these.